Welcome to another episode of Stop to Sell. Today we pause to talk about leadership, not the kind built on titles, authority, or motivational slogans. We are going to explore leadership as an inner process before it becomes an external role. In a world of constant pressure, rapid change, and cognitive overload, leadership is no longer just about making decisions. It's about regulating context, emotions, and human relationships. To explore this perspective, I'm joined by someone who bridges neuroscience, awareness, and the real leadership practice. My guest today is Arnisa. Hi, Arnisa.
Hi, Eduardo. It's such a pleasure being here.
No, it's a pleasure to receive you, a great researcher and a specialist in the neuroleadership like you, Arnisa. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. I'm very excited for this episode.
Me too, Arnisa. We have already met like 2 years ago, and it was a real pleasure to meet you and to work with you in my thesis. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Eduardo. The pleasure is definitely mutual.
Okay, Arnisa. Look, when people hear neuroleadership, they often think of buzzwords. How do you define this word, neuroleadership?
Maybe I would start with saying that buzzwords are not necessarily the enemy, because it's completely natural that in time when something becomes trendy and overused, it turns into a buzzword. But as long as the people that are using this word are providing actual information, true information that is helpful to people, I don't see a big issue with the usage of, with something becoming a buzzword, even if it's scientific. But when it comes to people asking me about neuroleadership, whether they call it neuroleadership, whether they call it the neuroscience of leadership, I always say that it is about the application of validated neuroscience findings. So this means that we want to use these findings to understand how leaders can improve the way that they think, the way that they decide, the way that they regulate their own emotions, the way that they help regulate other people's emotions, like their teams in this case, how they collaborate, and how they influence behaviors. So for me, it's always important to emphasize that it's not necessarily about some magical brain hacks or formulas that can help the leaders navigate through the workplace, but it's actually using in practice what science tells us. And for example, maybe the four main things that the four evidence-based areas would be: first, the decision making, like how our neural system handles uncertainty, how it handles pressure, how it handles risks, how it handles our cognitive biases. The second would be emotional regulation, how the brain is managing stress, how it's managing emotion, and how leaders can regain control, how they can regain presence, how they can maintain psychological safety even under pressure. Another thing would be social behavior, for example, and collaboration, like how the brain processes trust, how it processes fairness, how it processes empathy, how it processes even social threat and group belongings, and how leaders can create the conditions to reduce the feeling of threat and to increase the feeling of engagement. And another thing would also be change and habit formation. This is very important because this helps us support leaders creating environments that help people adapt, help themselves adapt, also help people adapt. So this in a nutshell is how neuroscience is being used to guide leaders into really supporting their teams, not just into gaining the best performance, because performance is like the end result, but the process is very important in this case, because you are creating an environment where all of this is being made achievable.
Okay. And what are the biggest misconceptions leaders still have about the brain and the leadership?
So there are like general misconceptions that not only leaders have, but also people in general, like how we have how people are left-brained or right-brained, or how we only use a certain percentage of our brain. But maybe today, for this question, I'm just going to focus on what I am encountering in my everyday work with leaders, because I think it's very relevant, and I believe it's also relevant for the audience and people outside of Kosovo. So, for example, one of the things that I am encountering almost every time in my work with people in lead position is that when we talk about team motivation, when we talk about what they are doing to motivate the team, what they are doing to maintain motivation, they always say things like, well, we have a really good bonus system, we have a really good recognition system. And I'm like, okay, but what bonus are we talking about? And it's usually always monetary. So their thoughts in this case is that people are mainly motivated by monetary rewards, which to a certain extent is true. Of course, money is very important for our motivation, but it is not the base. This is not the only thing you should do for the team, because it's only short-lived. Because what we learn from neuroscience is that social fairness, trust, the feeling of belonging, the autonomy, this activates stronger reward circuits than money itself. And on the other hand, if a reward system that only has money or monetary rewards and combined with threats, like when I say threats, I mean like pressure, humiliation, fear, it is not enough. It shuts down performance, even if reward is offered. So what leaders need to understand and know is that motivation is more social and more emotional than they actually assume. Another thing, Eduardo, is also that a lot of leaders say, I feel that I lack some skills because something is not working out. And when we do an assessment, I really see that they do have the abilities that they need to be a good leader. And so what is really going on? Because in terms of what we are finding from the assessments, they are doing great. They are showing really good leadership skills. But why is it not working? So the thing, Eduardo, is that the misconception that they have is that leadership relies only on skills and not biology. They completely underestimate how much we as humans rely on sleep, how much we as humans rely on nutrition, how much we rely on our fatigue levels, our emotional regulation capabilities, our cognitive load. So this is something that by most of the people that I work with gets kind of dismissed. Yeah, I only slept 3 hours today, but I still can be a good leader. I mean, you can be, but this is not sustainable. To be a sustainably good leader, you also have to look at your own biology and make sure that you are working on yourself, because all of these things that I mentioned, they directly affect the clarity, the judgment, the empathy, the self-control that a human has. So leadership is also an activity that doesn't only require behavioral things, but also neurobiological things to take care of. And maybe, Eduardo, the last one, but I think that I should have mentioned this as the first, because this is very important, is the misconception about that leaders should be unemotional, or like they should never show vulnerability. They have this idea that we have to be strong and detached, but most of the time, being strong all the time, detached all the time is counterproductive, not just for the leader themselves, because they are repressing their real emotions, their real vulnerability, but also for the team, because detachment is not really good. Showing an appropriate amount of vulnerability, admitting mistakes, it creates a better connection with the team. And I always tell the people that I work with, do you know that emotions at the workplace are contagious? Emotions are generally contagious, but especially at the workplace. So if you are not showing your whole, the real vulnerability that you have, if you always show up as strong, people sense it. People understand that this is not the real thing. So leaders that are more self-aware, that become self-aware of this, they can better create an environment where they engage their teams. So this is also one thing that I keep on trying to make the leaders aware of that being vulnerable is okay, and it actually can help sustain a better and productive team.
Okay, that's great. So, Arnisa, you talk about what the leaders aren't doing. So, I'm going to the other part. Okay, how does the brain actually make leadership decisions, especially under pressure or uncertain? So, how does the brain make that decisions right now?
Oh, well, Eduardo, whenever I hear like decision making, the first thing that comes to my mind is our fast thinking and slow thinking process.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about the fast thinking process, it includes our limbic system, specifically our amygdala, hippocampus, and other related circuits. What this system does is that it scans for threats or rewards in milliseconds. So it happens very fast. So the questions that this system is asking itself would be, is this safe? Will this hurt us? What happened the last time something like this happened? So it reacts based on past experiences, and then it sends emotional signals before we become consciously aware of that. And this usually pushes leaders towards quick and protective decisions. So under
Mm-hmm.
pressure, this system tends to become dominant. And this is why leaders sometimes react, defend, or decide very impulsively, even though they know that this is not the best choice. And then we have the slow thinking system, or the rational control system, that is made of our prefrontal cortex, concretely our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex that is handling logic, and our ventromedial prefrontal cortex that is dealing with the values, and orbitofrontal cortex that is dealing with the risk assessment or risk evaluation. Now, this system, Eduardo, is weighing options, is
Mm-hmm.
inhibiting these emotional impulses. It is calculating risks, and it's also trying to help us align the decision that we are making with the long-term strategy, if we are now talking about leadership, a long-term leadership strategy, for example, that we have. But the weakness is, Eduardo, that if we are going under, if something is happening under pressure, if we are under high
Mm-hmm.
stress, the slow thinking system of us, it becomes not dominant. So the other system, the limbic system, it becomes more dominant because the brain is shifting from analytic thinking to survival based reaction,
Okay.
because of the pressure that we are experiencing. So if
Mm-hmm.
ambiguity is high, then the brain assumes threat. And this is why the prefrontal cortex function tends to drop in those cases. So this can lead to reactive decisions. This can lead to a more narrow focus. This can lead to either risk avoidance or even risk taking. Now, it really depends on the context, but it also leads to an over-reliance on habits, on what happened in the past is going to happen again. So what maybe leaders can do to make better decisions under pressure is not something they can do there. There are some tools, Eduardo, and I'm going to tell you
Mm-hmm.
about them now. But what I try to do with the people that I work with is really prepare them
Mm-hmm.
before for what might happen, because
Okay.
it is really, really hard to get our attention back, or our slow system get dominance under pressure. So the thing that I do with leaders there, if something like if pressure is happening there and we need to do something now, what we first do is, of course, breathing, because
Mm-hmm.
we have to slow down our heart rate. This is going to signal to the amygdala that, okay, we are not dying, nothing bad is really happening to us. And the other thing is labeling the emotion. I am feeling
Okay.
sad, I am feeling overwhelmed, I am feeling bad, because this short pause is going to help restore the prefrontal cortex control. And this
Mm-hmm.
labeling emotion is like that. If the amygdala would say something like, what is happening now? Why are we talking about our emotions? We are literally dying. But if we are stopping, breathing,
Mm-hmm.
doing this pause, it can help restore the prefrontal cortex control. But what should actually be done happens way before the under pressure
Okay.
situation. leaders should know how to increase predictability. Having our brains love predictions. It also doesn't cost us a lot of energy metabolically if we can predict what happens. So if a leader is able to create clear communication and stable routines from way before, or from the beginning of them taking that leadership role into consideration, then that is going to reduce the limbic reactivity, not only of the team, but also their own limbic reactivity. So it is very important that if a leader can create clear communication and stable routines for the team to make that possible. Sometimes for this to happen, we also need to do a risk assessment. Now, different types of companies can do different types of risk assessments, maybe cybersecurity risk assessment or enterprise risk assessments. It really doesn't matter. But if we have a plan of what possible risks can be and what we possibly can do, we already have a routine in place of what happens if that happens, what we are going to do if that happens. And this can reduce the limbic reactivity. And it's very important for leadership to take that into consideration before anything happens. And maybe the last thing, Eduardo, is the thing that I mentioned before: rest and recovery.
Okay.
If we are fatigued, we are less likely to have a prefrontal cortex that makes good decisions. So we really need to be rested, really need to take care of our own health, because there are so many things that it contributes to the way that we lead that we aren't even aware of. So our physical health as well as our mental health is going to shape the way that we are going to lead our own selves and the people around us.
Okay, Arnisa, but well, by the way, and according to that, how can leaders build self-awareness in a practical, brain-aligned way?
Okay, building self-awareness in a practical and brain-aligned way, it is a lot about strengthening our neural circuits, especially our neural circuits that help leaders either notice or name and navigate our internal states. And this is primarily something that the insula, the medial prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex do, because self-awareness starts with sensing our own emotions within our own body. So one of the first things that we can do is do our own inside check-ins. For example, what am I feeling in my chest? What am I feeling in my stomach? What am I feeling when I'm breathing? So these type of body scans can be one of the first steps. And then also pausing during these work transitions that we have, pausing between meetings, pausing between important decisions. It is really important that we do this, because even though it only takes a short amount of time to do it, it can have a great impact on the way that we make decisions. And these practices also increase the activation of the insula, and this helps improve the accuracy in identifying our emotions, identifying the stress signals before we even try to explore any type of behavior. And the other thing I already mentioned was the labeling emotions in real time, because it is, as I said, it is something that reduces the amygdala's intensity, it increases the prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal control, and also it improves the regulation. So in practice, when we name it, it is important that we first also learn to understand the vocabulary. Most of the time when I'm working with leaders, sometimes they also don't know how to express or how to name the feeling that they have, because in our everyday vocabulary, we just don't use some certain words. So one of the first things or exercises that we do is learning what frustration means, what overstimulation means, what disappointment means, what even the word stress itself means, because we use stress so many times and don't always necessarily understand what we really mean when we say we are under stress. So labeling the emotions can help us make clearer decisions and can help us react less defensively. And one thing that not just leaders, but people in general, Eduardo, are not doing and should be doing more is use reflective writing.
Okay.
Journaling activates the medial prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex. So this supports emotional clarity and conflict detection. And it shouldn't have to be like a journaling where you write down your whole day and it's time consuming, because most of the time leaders are telling me, I don't want to journal because it takes a lot of time from my day. But this doesn't have to be the case, because a brain aligned method that we talked about, it can take up only 2 to 5 minutes, because you don't have to write about your whole day, but maybe you can answer like 3 core questions. For example, what happened? What did I feel? What do I need to explore? It can really be narrowed down to 3 questions, and that's going to be enough to activate those circuits. And also, one thing that I'm trying to integrate with the majority of the people that I'm working with is to ask for microfeedback, meaning that it can be just one question after one interaction from one person. It is very simple. Like after a meeting with your teammate, you can just ask them, was there any moment that you didn't understand me? Was there any moment that I was unclear? This is a microfeedback, and you don't have to go around and ask everybody, but these microfeedbacks is going to help you integrate external data within the internal perception. And this is a form of real-time social learning that is very, very important for long-term success. And also, I mentioned, Eduardo, the pause before reactions.
Okay.
One of the best advice that I have ever received. This was like maybe 3 years ago. I'm not sure. I was very mad. I was fuming and I wanted to send an email, and I was telling my friend about it, and I was like, I'm going to reply to this email and I'm going to show them, because that was my response. That was how I was feeling. And the friend told me, look, you got to promise me something. Please only wait 48 hours before responding to this email. And I was like, no, I'm not going to wait 48 hours to respond to this email. I want to respond immediately. And then he said, okay, look, let's compromise. Let's wait 24 hours. If you can wait 24 hours, then see how you feel in 24 hours. If you still want to reply the way you want to reply, then do it. If not, see what happens. And Eduardo, I did wait 24 hours, but I didn't even have to wait 24 hours. Just after a little time, I was already feeling calmer, and already knowing that, oh, if I would have responded that way, that wouldn't have looked good for me or for them, and it wouldn't have been productive at all. It would have been counterproductive. So we underestimate this pausing before responding, this pausing before deciding, because these little pauses, they reduce the threat reactivity, and it also increases the cognitive flexibility. It activates parts like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and it's all in all, it is better than responding right away. And also, maybe I'm talking too much, Eduardo, let me know.
No.
But one thing that I see, not only from leaders, but honestly, every human ever, nobody judges our own selves like our own selves. Like, we are the biggest judge of our own selves ever. And this is something that I observe a lot in leadership. They constantly judge themselves and think that other people are judging themselves too. But especially when it comes to triggers at the workplace, they judge themselves harshly because I'm a leader. I shouldn't be triggered by this. I should be stronger. And the thing is that self-awareness collapses when leaders become very self-critical. And I always tell leaders that if you want, for example, your anterior cingulate cortex to perform best, it is when you take a curious, not moralist stance. You should not judge yourself, oh my God, I am triggered and this makes me a bad leader. No, you have to ask things like, what triggered me? What threat did my brain predict? Was it physical? Was it emotional? Was it social? Is there any pattern that is being repeat it. So this creates a better self-awareness rather than judging yourself. Oh, I'm triggered again and I should be strong and I shouldn't be triggered. No, you have to ask yourself questions, answer those questions, and understand where everything is coming from so that you can work from that. And what else? Yes, another thing, Eduardo, would also be trying to create environments that reduce cognitive load. This is also important, not just for the leader themselves, but also for the team. One thing that leaders can do is maybe avoiding back-to-back meetings, if that is realistic. I really try to push this as much as I can, because when we have high cognitive load, so high things, a lot of high intensity things that require a lot of high intensity cognition from us, it can give us cognitive load, and our working memory is just not made to, it has limits. It has limited, it cannot receive and receive and receive. So therefore our brains cannot be regulated. So trying to create an environment that has less cognitive load can help the brain notice more. It can help the brain work better, and also just be aware, become more aware if we are working based on cognitive biases, if we are seeking, if maybe we are receiving information that is necessary or unnecessary. So anything that a leader can do to create a better environment at work is going to produce better results, not just for the leader themselves, but also for the team.
Okay. Well, Arnisa, before you said that you are the ones that push ourselves more than the others, and that make me think about a Portuguese psychologist called Paulo Moreira, and he has a quote that I always remember, and it is, if the things that you say to yourself, it was said by your best friend, what will be your relationship with him or her? And that is powerful, because you suddenly think, well, probably I have already broke my relationship with him or her. And that's the relation that you have with yourself.
True, true. That is definitely powerful.
Yes, that's true. Well, until now, Arnisa, we are putting our focus in the leader, but we are trying to change the focus to the team. Okay, like you said before, social neuroscience is important. Okay, so what does the brain need in order to trust a leader?
So in order for a team to trust a leader, I would say we need two very important things. The first thing is psychological safety, definitely. And as a result of psychological safety, but also other things, comes the release of oxytocin. We have also talked a little bit about oxytocin before at another podcast, and you already know that we name it usually the trust hormone, the bonding hormone, the social hormone. So these are two things that are very important, because they are fostered by consistent leadership. So a leader that demonstrates behavior like competence, character, and care, they are more likely to create psychological safe environments, and therefore also trigger oxytocin release within their teams. Oxytocin releases usually when we have positive social interactions. It doesn't necessarily need to come from a hug, because sometimes it's also called a hug hormone. It can come from open communication, it can come from empathy, it can come from cooperation. So all of these things simulate the release of oxytocin within the brain. And what oxytocin does, it doesn't just increase this feeling of social bonding, but it also reduces the levels of anxiety that we might have. So creating an environment where oxytocin gets released is very important for the leader as well as the team. And our amygdala is, as we already talked about, like the first brain threat detector. Now, a leader who is aware of the amygdala's role, they should understand how fight and flight mode understands. So they need to, after they learn the role that amygdala has, they know how to create a space where people feel safe so that the brain can focus on collaboration, the brain can focus on innovation rather than self-protection, because that's what amygdala is doing, is trying to protect us. And also the prefrontal cortex involvement. So our prefrontal cortex is responsible for more complex decisions, for risk assessments, for our brain is evaluating the leader's intention, the leader's reliability. So this information that we process, it helps us determine the potential risks as well as benefits of placing trust within a leader. So the behaviors that actually help build trust are very deeply related to the feeling of safety and the feeling of connection. And some specific behaviors that the leader can demonstrate is first demonstrating competence. So if we see that a leader has the necessary knowledge, the necessary skills, the necessary ability to guide the team in a successful manner, this is going to help us build the trust. But if they show incompetence, this can trigger a sense of threat, and also it's away from what our brain predicts. Our brain predicts that a leader in a leadership position knows what they are doing. And if they are showing incompetence, this goes outside of what we have predicted. So this can give us a sense of threat. Then we need a leader that is exhibiting character, is exhibiting integrity, because the brain looks for honesty. It looks for ethical behavior. It looks for consistency. People who really do what they say. People that own their mistakes, people that prioritize fairness, these are the people that are more trustworthy. So as well as people that show genuine care, people that are easy for us to predict. So our brain craves patterns. It likes patterns. It goes. So leaders who follow through these promises, they maintain consistent behaviors, gives us a sense of reliability. Also information when it's shared broadly, because uncertainty is something our brain doesn't like. So if a leader is making any type of decision and only a group of people know about that and the information comes too late, this is also something that can loosen the confidence that we have towards the leadership. And I already mentioned before, Eduardo, showing vulnerability, admitting mistakes, asking for help, also stimulates production of oxytocin. So helping others as well as asking for help is something that stimulates the oxytocin production, therefore the bonding between people, and is one of the reasons why it is important for leadership to also show vulnerability. So ultimately, it's all about creating an environment where the brain perceives that they are safe and they can trust the people that they work with and the leadership that they have above themselves.
Okay. And Arnisa, from a brain perspective, what differentiates a high-performance team from an average one?
High performance team from an average team. I would say that it is very similar to what we already spoke about. For example,
do you believe that the psychological safety environment could differentiate these types of teams?
Yes, I mean, because high performance teams, they operate in brain states that support trust. And they support collaboration, learning, rapid problem solving. And average teams, maybe we can say that they operate in states where uncertainty, caution, or even fragmented attention might happen. So it means that the team members that are within a psychologically safe environment, I would say that they anticipate each other's moves. So there's no surprises to what the other team member might do. They already know what they can expect from other team members. Therefore, they communicate more effortlessly, and also they think faster together maybe than alone. And when we're talking about average teams, they don't necessarily synchronize as fast. So there's a higher chance of misunderstanding each other, or even talking over each other, or even a higher chance of silo mentality. Silo mentality, Eduardo, is when people purposefully keep information from the other team members. And this can really, how to say, do bad to the work process in general. And oxytocin is also very important for trust and collaboration. As I already said, oxytocin increases when the communication is open, when the leaders are accessible, when the people feel valued, where vulnerability is allowed. And in average teams, low trust means that everybody is protecting themselves. Maybe I shouldn't call it average teams, but just other teams. What happens is that everyone is trying to protect their own selves. Information is withheld. Collaboration becomes fragile. So in essence, high-performing teams cultivate more positive and synchronized environment, and this maximizes their collective brain power and their collective intelligence, as well as emotional intelligence. So this is what I would say differentiates these two types of teams.
Great. Arnisa, we are almost finishing this episode, and I would like that you give to our audience practical application. So if a leader could change only one habit tomorrow to improve their leadership through neuroscience, what should it be?
I don't know. I'm kidding.
And if you know,
no,
what would you say?
Yeah, I did this on purpose because, Eduardo, one habit that they should start changing from tomorrow is allowing themselves to say, I don't know. Okay. It is completely okay. It is completely natural to not know things. So start saying, I don't know is important. Now, until this question, I kept on saying how our brain likes predictability. This is absolutely true. So maybe saying, I don't know sounds a little counterintuitive, but if you don't know and you give an answer that isn't true, long-term, that produces even more risk. So saying, I don't know right here, right now, can have a better effect than acting like you are knowing something, because when a leader says, I don't know, it lowers the threat response in others. So this is very important. When a leader pretends to know everything, usually the team can perceive some social evaluation threats, some fear of being wrong and fear of disagreeing with the leader. So all of these threats activate the amygdala, and it increases our cortisol levels. And when a leader is openly admitting to uncertainty, this reduces this hierarchy-driven threat, and it allows the prefrontal cortex to stay engaged. And this is very important. So acknowledging uncertainty engages also dopamine-based learning mechanisms. And this is important for a team who wants to keep learning and keep growing. It also reduces cognitive load for the leader in this case, because pretending to know everything, it means for the brain, it means that you are suppressing doubt. It means you have to maintain false certainty, and it inhibits contradictory evidence. So this is also bad for the leader's working memory. And in the end, we already spoke about oxytocin. Admitting that you are wrong can strengthen trust and oxytocin-mediated bonding, because honest admission of not knowing something is a signal of authenticity. It is a signal of humility. It is a signal of vulnerability. And these are all things known to increase oxytocin in social relationships, and therefore can improve trust and can improve cooperation. So from a neuroscience standpoint, saying I don't know can reduce the threat response, can activate learning circuits, can free cognitive resources, can prevent bias, and therefore strengthen trust.
Okay, Arnisa, great answer. But, well, I think that for a leader, it will be like difficult to think, well, now I'm going to increase oxytocin. Now I'm going to increase dopamine. So, what is one practical tool that leaders can use immediately after listening to this episode?
Mhm. So, since I'm going to give a practical tool, I'm going to focus more on what a leader should do for themselves, maybe rather
Okay.
than for the team, because increasing oxytocin and dopamine in the team, there is no one practical tool. It is a whole process. So, what I would say is that I would definitely like to go back, Eduardo, to
Mm-hmm.
what I said throughout this interview. They can and should absolutely use the name and frame technique.
Okay.
This is very important because it takes a very short amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
probably only around 10 seconds. It definitely depends on the individual, but it takes a very short amount of time, and it can improve emotional regulation, clarity, and team communication for the leader. But what does this mean? When a leader is under any kind of situation and is experiencing any time of feeling that just is hard for them to carry, it is important for them to help regulate their internal state by labeling what they are
Mm-hmm.
feeling or thinking. They can say, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling overwhelmed, just like I said before, I'm sensing tension, I feel frustrated. So this immediately helps our amygdala calm down. We are naming our internal state. Our amygdala doesn't know why we are now stopping to name a feeling when we are under so much stress, under so much pressure. So this kind of helps our amygdala calm down, and this is called affect labeling, and it is also neuroscience backed emotional regulation, one of the emotional regulation strategies, because it shifts the activity from our limbic system to our prefrontal cortex. And this is what a leader needs to do when they are under pressure and need to stay calm in order to make the best decision that they can at the time. And after you name the feeling and
Mm-hmm.
the activity shifts to the prefrontal cortex, now we have to regain control. Now the prefrontal cortex has to regain control, and this is when we have to do the framing part. First we did the naming part, now we are doing the framing part. So the framing is that after naming the state, the leader can add a very simple frame, like, I'm feeling sad, here is what we need,
Of
or what
course.
I need to do, or I'm feeling frustrated because of this work overload. The framing
Mm-hmm.
could be, here is the priorities, or here's my priority, or let's focus on solutions. So naming reduces emotional noise, framing increases cognitive clarity, and together they help reset from this limbic system dominance. So a very quick example could be, I'm feeling overwhelmed with the timeline. Framing could be, let's prioritize the 2 top tasks, the 3 top tasks, the 1 top tasks, and so on. So this is a very practical, very easy, very simple tool that any leader can use from listening to this interview, and so on.
Arnisa, thank you so much. Thank you for a such and clear, thoughtful, and deeply human connection. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. I really, really enjoyed this episode with you. I always enjoy our meetings. I'm so happy that we collaborate, and I cannot wait to see the results.
Yes, Arnisa. And I think what stands out from this episode is that leadership is not a strategical act, it's a neurological and emotional one. And
Mm,
throughout this episode, we have seen that team performance don't start or doesn't start, well said, with key performance indicators. It
mm,
starts with the internal states, with how leaders regulate themselves,
yeah.
communicate, create safety, and bring predictably to the system.
That
And
is
for everyone listening, I would like to leave with one simple question. What impact does my internal state have on the brains and behaviors of people I lead?
mm, that's important.
Because before selling a vision, before asking for results, before expecting commitment, leaders influence first through who they are, not
Mm.
just through what they say.
And that is true, Eduardo. And I'm really happy that people are starting to understand this and are starting to work on themselves and work with professionals to get there, to become better leaders, to use to actually integrate the human part in every profession that they are working. So I'm really, really happy that people are becoming aware of this. And awareness is definitely the first step of what we will later do to make everything more human and more, as you said, brain based, or how brain aligned, you said. I like that a lot.
Arnisa, honestly, I hope that we and with the help of another people that I have the opportunity to meet, like Ruben Carvajal, we will have the opportunity to put these insights and these tools in action. I
No,
hope that the future give us this opportunity. Arnisa, thanks a lot. It is always a great time to be with you, to record episodes with you.
thank you,
Thanks a
Eduardo.
lot, Arnisa.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. See you soon.
See you. But well, just one moment, and for the people we are listening us, if this episode sparked a reflection, feel free to share it with someone who leads others or with someone learning to lead themselves. You can find these and all other episodes of Stop to Sell on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, sometimes pausing is the smartest move a leader can make.
So
See
beautiful.
you. See you next episode. Thanks a lot, Arnisa.
Thank you, Eduardo.